You want to know why I'm here? Why I made the request I made? Why it shocked everyone, including you? A man on the edge of eternity, he gets a different kind of clarity.
You've got my attention. What happened?
This is how everything started.
It was 4 hours before the state of Texas would execute Jasper Beaumont, and what he whispered through those prison bars changed everything for Officer Briggs Calhoun. By the end of this night, Briggs would discover that the brother he'd spent 17 years searching for had been right under his nose all along. But first, you need to understand why a condemned murderer would use his final request to send a lawman digging in the dark Texas soil. Officer, I need you to remember these numbers. 29.9501 degrees north. 95.5619 degrees west. My last wish ain't for me. It's for the boy you've been searching for. Briggs felt his world tilt sideways. Those coordinates had haunted his dreams since the night his family was destroyed. Since the night Emmett vanished without a trace. How could this man possibly know? For 23 years, Briggs Calhoun had worn his badge with honor, escorting the worst criminals Texas had to offer without ever flinching. He'd been trained by the best, Sheriff Roy Kincaid himself, and had built his entire life around two things: upholding the law and finding his missing brother. So when Jas Beaumont, convicted of burning 3 people alive inside a little country church, suddenly knew things only a Calhoun should know, Briggs felt the ground crumbling beneath his feet. Jas sat cross-legged on his cell floor, humming that Miles Davis tune, fingers dancing across invisible piano keys. These were the same fingers witnesses swore had struck the match that night. The same fingers now pointing Briggs toward what he'd sought for nearly 2 decades. Your brother isn't where you think, Jas said softly, and neither is the truth about what happened that night. In the sterile corridor of death row, with the smell of institutional disinfectant burning his nostrils, Briggs made the first truly unprofessional decision of his career. He leaned in close to those bars. You have 4 hours to live, Briggs whispered. Why tell me now? Jas finally opened his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a killer. They were tired, knowing, almost peaceful. Because tonight, justice gets served 2 ways. And your mentor, Sheriff Kincaid? He's already heading to those coordinates with a shovel. The melody Jas hummed changed then. It wasn't jazz anymore. It was the lullaby their mother used to sing to Emmett. A tune no one outside their family should know. Let me take you back to where it all began. The smell hit Briggs first, gunpowder and burning cedar. The night 17 years ago crashed over him in waves of sensory memory. His father's desperate shout, his mother's scream cut terribly short, the weight of young Emmett pressed against him as they hid in the closet. The night that transformed a loving family of 4 into one broken man with a badge, searching endlessly for ghosts. 6 months earlier, the first time Briggs Calhoun met Jasper Jas Beaumont, Texas was baking under a merciless June sun. Highway 75 stretched ahead like a ribbon of melting tar as Briggs drove the prison transport van toward Huntsville Medical Center. Just another Tuesday, Sergeant Wilson had said, handing over the paperwork. Monthly checkup for inmate 4873. Watch this one, though. Quiet type. Too quiet. Briggs had transported hundreds of inmates during his career. The dangerous ones shouted threats. The scared ones begged for mercy. The manipulative ones tried to charm their way into special treatment. But he'd never met one like Jas Beaumont. The man sat perfectly still in the back of the van, hands and feet shackled, eyes closed. Thin sunlight filtered through the barred windows, casting prison-striped shadows across his face. He looked like he was listening to a symphony only he could hear. You gonna behave today, Beaumont? Briggs asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Jazz opened his eyes slowly. "A time to kill, and a time to heal," he said softly. "A time to break down, and a time to build up." Briggs felt the hairs on his neck stand up. "Ecclesiastes 3, he said. "You religious or something?" Jazz's fingers began tapping against his knee, an intricate rhythm that seemed to flow through his entire body. "Not religion, Officer Calhoun. Recognition. Same difference to some." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Your badge says Johnson." Briggs frowned. His temporary badge did indeed say Johnson. He'd forgotten his own that morning. "How'd you know my name?" "Giant steps," Jazz replied, his fingers still keeping that complex beat. Coltrane understood. You can't rush through the changes. That was the beginning, the first thread in a web that would eventually entangle them both. Every third Tuesday for the next 6 months, Briggs drove Jazz to his medical appointments. The warden called it consistent procedure. The other guards called it punishment duty. "That one gives me the creeps," Officer Mendoza told Briggs after the second trip. "Talks in riddles. Sees things others don't." By the third month, Briggs understood what Mendoza meant. Jazz never spoke directly. Everything was Bible verses or jazz references or both, twisted together in a language that shouldn't make sense but somehow did. "You slept bad last night," Jazz said during their August drive. "The rain on your roof sounds like fingernails when you're alone." Briggs nearly swerved off the road. He hadn't told anyone about his insomnia, about how the summer storms kept him awake with memories. "Stay out of my head, Beaumont." Jazz just smiled. Psalm 139 verse 2. "You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar." After the fourth trip, Briggs broke his own rule. He read Jazz's file. The crime scene photos made him sick. Little Faith Baptist Church, hardly more than a wooden shack on the outskirts of Mender County. The charred remains of Pastor Green. The Wilkins couple who'd been there for evening counseling. All three trapped when someone chained the doors shut from the outside and lit the place up like a bonfire on the 4th of July. Jazz's fingerprints on the chains. Jazz's boot prints in the mud. A witness who placed his car at the scene. An open-end shut case except for one detail that nagged at Briggs. Jazz never confessed, never denied. He simply stopped speaking normally after his arrest. Like the fire had burned away his ability to communicate except through verses and song lyrics. September brought a different kind of heat. During their drive, Jazz asked about Emmett. "You had a brother once," Jazz said, watching the Texas landscape blur past the window. "Younger. Played piano like he was born to it." Briggs felt ice water in his veins. "How do you know about Emmett?" "Amazing Grace," Jazz hummed softly. "How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." "Answer me, Beaumont. How do you know about my brother?" Jazz turned those knowing eyes on him. "The same way I know about the coordinates. The same way I know you dream about him calling your name. The same way I know Sheriff Kincaid isn't who you think." Briggs pulled the van to the shoulder so violently that the tires threw gravel like buckshot. "Don't you say another word," he growled, turning to face the prisoner. "Not another goddamn word." Jazz fell silent, but his fingers kept moving, tapping out patterns on his knee that looked disturbingly like numbers. Latitude and longitude. That night, Briggs requested to be removed from transport duty. Request denied. "You've established rapport," the warden said. "Beaumont's been more compliant since you took over. Less incidents." So the drives continued. October, November, December. With each trip, Jazz revealed another piece of knowledge he shouldn't have. About Briggs. About Emmett. About the night 17 years ago when everything changed. Other guards started watching Briggs differently, whispering when he passed. "Beaumont's got his hooks in you," Sergeant Wilson warned. "Happens sometimes. They find your weak spot and dig in." But it wasn't that simple. Jazz wasn't manipulating him. It felt more like Jazz was preparing him, piece by cryptic piece, for something bigger. In early January, Briggs was assigned an additional duty: cell inspection for death row inmates. When he reached Jazz's cell, what he saw stopped him cold. Every inch of the concrete walls was covered in writing. Not the usual prison tallies or obscenities or gang symbols. Musical notations. Hundreds of them, flowing around the cell like a river of sound made visible. But interspersed among them were numbers. Pairs of numbers that looked random until Briggs realized with a sinking feeling that they were coordinates. "What is all this?" he demanded, gesturing at the walls. Jazz sat cross-legged on his thin mattress. "Maps," he said simply. "Some for where we've been. Some for where we're going." "And where are we going, Beaumont?" Jazz's eyes found his, penetrating and certain. "To the truth, Officer Calhoun. About your brother. About why I'm really here." That's when Jazz began to hum. The tune froze Briggs where he stood. It wasn't jazz or hymns or anything he expected. It was a simple melody, childish almost. Twinkle Star Variations. The song Emmett had composed when he was 12 years old. The song he played at his school recital the week before he vanished. The song no one else in the world should know. "How?" Briggs whispered, his mouth dry. Jazz smiled sadly. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 15. "What has already been, and what will be has been before." The cell door closed automatically behind Briggs as he stumbled forward. "Tell me everything," he demanded. "Tell me right now." Jazz shook his head slowly. "Not yet. The time isn't right." "When?" "When they set my execution date," Jazz said, his voice suddenly clear and normal, like a radio finding the right frequency. "That's when you'll know. That's when we all will." 2 days later, the warden called Briggs to his office. "Thought you should know," he said, sliding a paper across his desk. "Your regular passenger just got his date with the needle. For months from today." Briggs looked down at the execution order, his heart pounding. The clock had started ticking. 17 years ago. The last normal evening of Briggs Calhoun's life smelled like his mother's pot roast and sounded like Emmett's fingers dancing across piano keys. "Play the new one," their mother called from the kitchen. "The Star Song." 15-year-old Emmett grinned, pushing his dark hair from his eyes. "It's called Twinkle Star Variations, Mom. Not the Star Song." Briggs lounged on the sofa, pretending to read a car magazine while secretly admiring his younger brother's talent. At 18, Briggs had already accepted his place as the family protector, not its artist. Emmett was the gifted one, the sensitive soul who could make music flow like water. Their father entered the living room for the third time that hour, casually checking the windows before adjusting the curtains. "Dad, you're blocking my light," Briggs complained. Marcus Calhoun didn't seem to hear. His eyes scanned the darkened yard outside their modest home on the outskirts of Mender County. Something about his posture made Briggs lower his magazine. "Dad, everything okay?" His father turned, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Fine, son. Just thought I saw headlights." Emmett stopped playing, the final note hanging in the air. "Are we expecting company?" "No," their father said too quickly. "No company tonight. Just us." Their mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Sarah Calhoun had the same dark eyes as Emmett, warm and perceptive. "Dinner's ready." As they gathered around the table, Briggs noticed his father's hand shake slightly as he reached for the salt. Marcus Calhoun was a steady man, a county clerk known for his meticulous attention to detail. Nothing made him nervous. "How was work today, Dad?" Emmett asked, passing the mashed potatoes. Their father hesitated just a fraction too long. "Routine. Just routine paperwork." Later, Briggs would replay this moment 1,000 times. The lie in his father's voice, the way his mother's eyes lingered on her husband, concern visible in the tiny wrinkle between her brows. The normal family dinner that wasn't normal at all. After the meal, their father disappeared into his study. Through the door left slightly ajar, Briggs overheard fragments of a hushed phone call. "Found something in the county records. Drug money moving through evidence lockup. Need to meet tonight. Bring the files. When Marcus emerged, he seemed startled to find Briggs in the hallway. Son, he said, placing a heavy hand on Briggs's shoulder. You take care of your brother. You hear me? No matter what. Sure, Dad, Briggs replied, confused by the intensity in his father's eyes. Always do. I'm serious, Briggs. Emmett looks up to you. He needs you to be strong. Before Briggs could ask what was wrong, Emmett's piano music filled the house again. Their father's face softened at the sound. Your brother's got a gift, he said quietly. Make sure he gets to use it. The family settled into their evening routine. Their mother read her mystery novel. Their father pretended to watch the news while his eyes kept drifting to the windows. Emmett played piano. Briggs cleaned his hunting rifle, preparing for the weekend trip that would never come. By 11 o'clock, Briggs was dozing on the couch when he heard his father curse under his breath. The sound of tires on gravel pulled him fully awake. Get Emmett, his father ordered, suddenly alert. Both of you upstairs. Now. What's going on? Their mother asked, rising from her chair. Marcus Calhoun pulled a revolver from behind a book on the shelf. Sarah, take the boys upstairs. Use the closet in our room. Don't come out no matter what you hear. Headlights swept across the living room walls. Dad, Briggs started. Now, Briggs. Move. Their mother grabbed Emmett from the piano bench, her face pale with fear. Briggs followed them up the stairs, his heart hammering against his ribs. In here, their mother whispered, pushing open the bedroom door. The closet. Mom, what's happening? Emmett asked, his voice cracking with fear. The sound of breaking glass downstairs answered his question. Their mother pushed them into the walk-in closet, her hands trembling. Stay here. Don't make a sound. Mom, no. Briggs tried to follow her, but she pressed her palm against his chest. Take care of your brother, she whispered, eyes brimming with tears. Promise me. Before he could respond, she closed the door, leaving them in darkness. Emmett grabbed Briggs's arm, fingers digging into skin. What's happening? I don't know, Briggs lied. But we need to be quiet. The shouting started seconds later, their father's voice, demanding someone leave. Unknown voices, harsh and threatening. Their mother crying out. Then the first gunshot. Emmett's hand clamped over his own mouth to stifle a scream. Briggs pulled his brother tight against him. Both of them huddled behind winter coats. More shouting. A crash of furniture. Another shot. Their mother screamed. A sound that ripped through Briggs like a physical wound. Then silence. Terrible silence. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Deliberate. Check everywhere. A voice ordered. The files have to be here somewhere. What about the kids? Another voice asked. Find them. Emmett trembled against Briggs, tears soaking through his t-shirt. Briggs reached blindly in the dark, his hand closing around an old baseball bat. The bedroom door crashed open. Nothing in here, someone called. Check the closet. Briggs positioned himself in front of Emmett, bat raised. The closet door swung open, light flooding in. A masked figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. Got M, the man shouted. 2 kids in here. Briggs swung the bat with every ounce of strength he possessed. Connected with the man's arm, drawing a howl of pain. Briggs pushed forward, swinging again, clearing a path. Run, Emmett, he screamed. They burst from the closet, racing for the hallway. Another masked man appeared, grabbing for Emmett. Briggs tackled him, both crashing into the dresser. Emmett made it to the door before a third man caught him, lifting the struggling teenager off his feet. Let him go, Briggs roared, fighting to reach his brother. Something hard struck the back of his head. The world tilted sideways. As he fell, he saw Emmett being dragged down the hallway, fighting wildly, his face contorted in terror. The light from a flashlight briefly illuminated the crescent-shaped birthmark behind his ear. Briggs! Emmett screamed. Help me! The last thing Briggs heard before darkness took him was one masked man calling to another. Roy, we got what we came for. Burn it all. The smell of smoke filled his nostrils as consciousness slipped away. Beeping machines pulled Briggs back to life. A hospital room, stark white and smelling of antiseptic. His head throbbed with each heartbeat. A figure sat beside his bed, head bowed. Sheriff Roy Kincaid looked up as Briggs stirred, his weathered face lined with what appeared to be grief. "Thank God," the sheriff said, reaching for Briggs's hand. "Thought we might lose you too, son." The memories crashed back like a physical blow. "My family," Briggs croaked. "My parents. Emmett." Kincaid's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry, Briggs. Your parents, they didn't make it. House was nearly burned to the ground when we got there. You're lucky to be alive." "Emmett," Briggs insisted, trying to sit up. "They took Emmett." Kincaid pressed him gently back against the pillows. "We're looking for him. Every available officer, state police, FBI, will find him, Briggs. I promise you that." "I heard them," Briggs said, his voice breaking. One of them was called. The name dissolved in his mind, slipping away like water through fingers. Something important, something he needed to remember. But concussion and trauma had buried it deep. "Called what, son?" Briggs shook his head, wincing at the pain. "I can't remember." Kincaid squeezed his hand. "It'll come back. Right now, you need to rest." "Why?" Briggs whispered. "Why my family?" "Your father stumbled onto something," Kincaid said carefully. "Drug-related, we think. Wrong place, wrong time. These animals." He stopped, jaw tightening. "We'll get them, Briggs. And we'll find your brother." They never found Emmett. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. The burned shell of the Calhoun house was eventually torn down. The case grew cold. People stopped mentioning Emmett's name around Briggs, as if his brother had become a ghost too painful to acknowledge. But Briggs never stopped searching. He moved in with his mother's sister at first, going through the motions of finishing high school. But the moment he graduated, he applied to the police academy. If the system couldn't find his brother, he would become the system. Sheriff Kincaid became his mentor, his surrogate father, the man who understood his pain and channeled it into purpose. "You've got good instincts," Kincaid told him during firearms training. "Your daddy would be proud." Briggs wondered sometimes why the mention of his father made something cold slide down his spine. Why certain moments around Kincaid triggered fragments of memory he couldn't quite grasp. The nightmares started his second year at the academy. Always the same. Emmett standing on a dark road, surrounded by trees, calling his name. Coordinates flashing like neon behind him. 29.9501 degrees north. 95.561, 9 degrees west. He woke from these dreams drenched in sweat. The numbers burned into his mind. When he checked maps, the location was an empty stretch of Farm Road 1960, 40 miles from where they'd lived. Officers had searched the area repeatedly after Emmett's disappearance. Nothing. Yet the dreams persisted. On his 25th birthday, Kincaid took him to dinner at the steakhouse in town. "Been thinking," the sheriff said, cutting into his ribeye. "It's time you moved up. Detective position opening next month. You should apply." "I'm not qualified," Briggs argued. "Only been on the force 3 years." Kincaid waved away his protest. "You're ready. Besides, the increased clearance might help with your brother's case. New files you can't access now." Briggs studied the older man's face, searching for signs of deception. But Kincaid's eyes held only what appeared to be genuine concern. "Why do you care so much?" Briggs asked suddenly. "About me. About finding Emmett." Kincaid set down his knife and fork, expression solemn. "Because I made a promise, son. To your father. My father. Marcus and I grew up together. Weren't always on the same side of things, but there was respect there. The night before it happened, he called me. Said he'd found something dangerous. Wanted my help." Kincaid's voice roughened. "I was too late. By the time I got there." A weight settled in Briggs's chest. "You never told me this. Didn't want to give you false hope. But I swore on his grave I'd look after his boys. And I'm still looking for Emmett. Every single day. 5 years later, when Briggs made detective, Kincaid pinned the badge on his chest himself. The sheriff's hands were steady, but something in his eyes made Briggs uncomfortable. A shadow. A secret. He'd be proud of you, Kincaid whispered, fixing the badge in place. We're family now. That night, the dream came again. Emmett standing on that lonely stretch of road. But this time, something new. Something terrifying. As Briggs approached his brother, Emmett's face changed, morphing into Jazz Beaumont's. The truth is buried, brother, Dream Emmett said in Jazz's voice. Dig it up before they burn it all again. Briggs woke gasping, the smell of gunpowder and burning cedar so vivid he could taste it. For the first time in 17 years, a fragmented memory surfaced. One of the masked men calling to another. A name, Roy, the same as his mentor, his surrogate father, the man who'd guided every step of his search for Emmett. Sheriff Roy Kincaid. 9:30 p.m. Execution night. Family emergency, Briggs told Warden Phillips, his voice steady despite the thunder of his pulse. My aunt in Houston. Heart attack. The warden frowned, glancing at his watch. Tonight of all nights, Calhoun? You're supposed to witness Beaumont's execution in less than 3 hours. I know, sir. I'm sorry. Briggs kept his face neutral, though his mind screamed with urgency. Every second mattered. I'll be back before midnight. See that you are. The warden scribbled on a form. Have someone cover your rounds until then. Briggs nodded, already backing toward the door. The name Roy echoed in his mind like a death knell. Could it be coincidence? A trick of memory? Or had his mentor, the man who'd shaped his entire adult life, been present the night his family was destroyed? Rain pounded the parking lot as Briggs sprinted to his truck. His uniform would be soaked through, but he didn't care. The coordinates Jazz had given him burned in his mind like a brand. 29.9501 degrees north. 95.5619 degrees west. The prison disappeared in his rearview mirror, swallowed by sheets of rain and darkness. Briggs punched the address into his GPS with trembling fingers, then floored the accelerator. The digital clock on his dashboard read 9:38 p.m. What are you doing, Calhoun? He muttered to himself, wiping rain from his face. Chasing ghosts on the word of a killer? But those coordinates had haunted his dreams for 17 years. And Jazz knew things. Impossible things. His phone rang, the screen lighting up with the prison's number. Briggs silenced it, tossing it onto the passenger seat. It rang again almost immediately. Ignored again. The rain intensified, his wipers struggling against the downpour. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the empty farmland stretching in all directions. This far from the city, darkness was absolute between flashes. Jazz's voice slipped into his mind. Their conversation 3 months ago during another rainy drive. There's treasure in the dirt, Officer Calhoun, Jazz had said, watching raindrops race down the window. Truth buried by men who think darkness keeps their secrets. What secrets? Briggs had asked. Jazz's fingers had tapped out what seemed like random rhythms. Matthew 7 verse 7. Seek and ye shall find. But are you ready for what you'll find? The GPS announced his approach to Farm Road 1960. Briggs slowed, peering through the curtain of water for mile markers. His headlights caught a reflective sign. Mile 42. Close. So close. Another lightning flash, another memory. Jazz humming Emmett's song. Those knowing eyes watching him. Your brother's coordinates live in your dreams for a reason. Mile 43. The road narrowed, bordered by twisted oak trees that reached like gnarled hands toward the sky. No houses out here. No streetlights. Just wilderness and secrets. Mile 44. Briggs's phone rang for the 5th time. He glanced at it. Not the prison now. Sheriff Kincaid. His stomach clenched into a fist of ice. He let it ring. The GPS chimed softly. You have arrived at your destination. Briggs pulled over, tires crunching on wet gravel. His headlights illuminated a rusty mile marker. 45. This was it. The place from his nightmares. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but lightning still flashed overhead, followed by growling thunder. Briggs grabbed his flashlight and shovel from behind the seat. His boots sank into mud as he circled the truck, scanning the roadside. Nothing special about this spot. Just trees, brush, and the endless Texas night. What was he supposed to find here? Jazz's voice again, from their last transport together. Look for the split oak. Nature remembers what men try to forget. Briggs swept his flashlight across the tree line. There, 20 yards from the road, a massive oak split down the middle by lightning, its twin trunks reaching skyward like desperate arms. His heart hammered against his ribs as he approached. The ground around the tree was undisturbed, covered with years of fallen leaves and natural debris. No obvious signs of digging, but that made sense. According to Jazz, whatever was buried here had been hidden for nearly 2 decades. Briggs dropped to his knees, setting the flashlight on a rock to illuminate the area. He began to dig with the shovel, tearing through the soft upper layer of earth. 3 feet out from the tree's base. That's what his dreams had shown him. The soil grew denser as he dug deeper. Red Texas clay, stubborn and unyielding. Sweat mingled with rain on his face despite the cool night air. His phone rang again in his pocket. Ignored. 6 inches down. Nothing. 12 inches. Nothing. At 18 inches, the shovel hit something solid with a dull thunk. Briggs froze, then began scraping more carefully, heart racing. The edge of something metallic gleamed in the flashlight's beam. His shovel clattered to the ground as he dropped to his knees, digging with bare hands now. Fingers clawed through mud, nails breaking as he frantically cleared soil from around his discovery. A metal box roughly the size of a shoebox. Military-grade, waterproof. Jesus Christ, he whispered, pulling it free from its earthen prison. It's real. The box was heavier than expected, sealed with a simple latch. No lock. Whoever buried it never expected anyone to find it. Or perhaps they wanted it found eventually by the right person. Briggs's hands trembled as he popped the latch. The lid resisted briefly, then opened with a soft hiss of preserved air. Inside, protected by the watertight seal, lay secrets 17 years buried. A cassette tape labeled simply Testimony. A manila folder containing what appeared to be financial records. Photographs, several of them old-fashioned prints with scalloped edges. Briggs lifted the first photo with fingers that didn't feel like his own. His father, Marcus Calhoun, standing outside an unfamiliar house. His arm around a beautiful dark-skinned woman Briggs had never seen before. And between them, a boy about 12 years old with familiar eyes. Eyes Briggs now saw every month during prisoner transports. The second photo showed his father in what appeared to be a recording studio. The woman again. The boy, older now, sitting at a piano. They looked happy, like a family. His father had another family. The third photo punched the air from his lungs. His father with both families. Marcus and Sarah Calhoun. Young Briggs and Emmett. The woman and her son. All together at what appeared to be a picnic. Briggs had no memory of this day. No memory of meeting these people who seemed so comfortable with his father. With shaking hands, he opened the manila folder. Birth certificates. The first was for Jasper Marcus Beaumont, born to Eliza Beaumont and Marcus Calhoun. 15 years before Briggs was born. Jazz was his half-brother. A half-brother who'd been on death row for 15 years while Briggs carried on his life, never knowing the connection. Jesus Christ, he whispered again, the world tilting beneath him. He reached for the cassette tape. Without a player, he couldn't hear what was recorded. But a handwritten note wrapped around it explained enough. Marcus, I've recorded everything as insurance. The drug operation. The money laundering through county records. The officers involved. If anything happens to me, this goes to the FBI. Keep your boys safe. Both families. They'll come for you first. Raymond. His father's friend who died in a hunting accident 2 months before the attack on their home. The last item in the box was a sealed letter. Briggs's name written on the front in his father's handwriting. With trembling fingers, he tore it open. Briggs, my son, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened. I discovered something I shouldn't have. Sheriff Kincaid and his men are running drugs through the county evidence room. Millions of dollars. I gathered proof, but they know I know. I've sent copies to the FBI, but I fear it won't be in time. There's something else you need to know. You have an older half-brother, Jasper, from before I met your mother. Eliza and I never married, but I've always provided for them. Your mother knows. We were planning to tell you and Emmett when you were older. If I don't survive, find Jasper. He can help protect Emmett. Trust no one in the department, especially not Kincaid. He's behind all of it. I love you, son. Be strong for your brother. Dad. Briggs sat back on his heels, rain washing over him unnoticed. Everything he believed about the past 17 years had just shattered. His mentor was his enemy. A death row inmate was his brother. And somewhere out there, Emmett might still be alive. Lightning flashed again, closer this time. In its brief illumination, Briggs spotted something that froze his blood. Tire tracks in the mud nearby. Fresh ones. Someone else had been here recently. Very recently. His phone rang again. This time he answered. Where are you, son? Sheriff Kincaid's voice, warm with concern that now sounded like poison. Had a family emergency, Briggs replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. My aunt in Houston. Funny thing about that, Kincaid said, his tone shifting subtly. I just spoke with your aunt. She's feeling fine. Not a heart attack in sight. Briggs's mouth went dry. Must be some confusion. No confusion, Briggs. Just disappointment. A pause. You shouldn't have gone digging, son. Some secrets are buried for a reason. The line went dead. Briggs scrambled to his feet, shoving the contents back into the metal box. Headlights appeared in the distance, approaching fast from the direction he'd come. He had what he needed now. Proof. But he was running out of time. It was 10:47 p.m. Jas Beaumont, his half-brother, would be dead in just over an hour. And Briggs was now certain that Sheriff Kincaid wanted them both silenced forever. 10:45 p.m. The headlights grew larger, cutting through the rain like twin blades. Briggs shoved the metal box under his jacket and scrambled toward his truck, boots slipping in the mud. Too late. The approaching vehicle was already turning onto the shoulder, blocking his escape. Not one vehicle. 3. Sheriff Department SUVs. Their light bars dark but unmistakable. Briggs's hand went to his service weapon as the first vehicle stopped. His mind raced through options, each worse than the last. Run into the woods? Stand his ground? Neither seemed likely to end with him alive. The driver's door of the lead SUV swung open. Sheriff Roy Kincaid stepped out, rain plastering his silver hair to his skull. In 23 years, Briggs had never seen the man without his signature Stetson. Tonight, it was replaced by something else. A gun, pointed steadily at Briggs's chest. Should have left it buried, Briggs, Kincaid called over the patter of raindrops. 3 deputies emerged from the other vehicles. Ramirez, Donovan, Walsh, good men as far as Briggs knew. Men he'd worked with for years. All 3 had their weapons drawn. What's going on, Sheriff? Deputy Ramirez asked, confusion evident in his voice. Officer Calhoun here has been tampering with evidence, Kincaid said smoothly. Digging up old history best left forgotten. Briggs clutched the metal box tighter against his chest. Is that what you call murdering my parents? Kidnapping my brother? Just old history. The deputies exchanged glances. This clearly wasn't what they expected. Kincaid took another step forward, rain streaming down his weathered face. You don't know what you're talking about, son. Don't call me son, Briggs spat. I know everything. About my father. About what he found. About what you did. Your father, Kincaid said, his voice hardening, stuck his nose where it didn't belong. My father was a federal agent, Briggs replied, the truth of it settling into his bones as he spoke. Wasn't he? Working undercover in the county clerk's office. Something flickered in Kincaid's eyes. Surprise quickly masked. Marcus Calhoun was no clerk, the sheriff admitted, his gun never wavering. Deep cover for 5 years. Supposed to be investigating cartels moving product through our county. Instead, he started looking at his fellow officers. You were running drugs through the evidence lockup, Briggs said. Millions of dollars worth. He found the paperwork. Kincaid's laugh was bitter as winter frost. Not just drugs, son. Weapons. People. Whatever paid. This county sits on the perfect smuggling corridor. Been that way since before your daddy ever showed his face around here. The rain fell harder now, thunder rolling overhead. Briggs felt strangely calm, the pieces of his shattered life finally clicking into place. So you killed him, Briggs said. And my mother. Business, Kincaid replied with a shrug that turned Briggs's stomach. Nothing personal. Your daddy knew the risks when he took the assignment. Deputy Donovan lowered his weapon slightly. Sheriff, what the hell are you talking about? Kincaid ignored him, eyes locked on Briggs. Put down the box, son. Walk away from this. It's ancient history now. What about Emmett? Briggs demanded. Was murdering a 15-year-old boy just business too? Something shifted in Kincaid's expression. Not guilt. Something worse. Amusement. The boy wasn't supposed to be there that night, Kincaid said. We had intelligence your parents would be alone. Finding you two was unexpected. Briggs felt sick. So you took him. You killed my parents and took my brother. Your brother, Kincaid said carefully. Complicated things. He saw faces, names, heard things a living witness shouldn't hear. While they talked, Briggs slowly, casually slipped his free hand into his pocket, fingers finding his phone. Without looking, he pulled up the emergency app he'd installed years ago. One designed to livestream directly to internal affairs servers. One press. That's all it would take. He pressed it. Where is he? Briggs demanded, needing to keep Kincaid talking. Where's Emmett? The sheriff's smile was cold as a snake's. Dead, of course. Just like you'll be. Just like that half-brother of yours will be at midnight. Half-brother? Deputy Ramirez repeated, his brow furrowing. What's he talking about, Briggs? Jazz Beaumont, Briggs answered, never taking his eyes off Kincaid. The man scheduled to die tonight is my father's son from another relationship. My brother. And you never knew, Kincaid said almost gleefully. All these years you've been escorting your own flesh and blood to his death. That's rich. Did you frame him for the church fire? Briggs asked, the horrible possibility dawning on him. Kincaid shook his head. Didn't have to. Your half-brother did plenty all on his own to earn that needle. But he made a useful scapegoat for other things. The metal box felt heavier with each passing second. Evidence. Truth. 17 years of lies exposed. I need to hear the tape, Briggs said, slowly opening the box and removing the cassette. Put that down, Kincaid barked, taking another step forward. You all need to hear this, Briggs said, addressing the deputies directly. Before you follow orders you can't take back. From his truck, Briggs had grabbed an old cassette player during his frantic search earlier. Now he slipped the tape inside and pressed play. For a moment there was only static. Then a voice emerged, young and frightened. Emmett's voice. I'm making this recording in case something happens to me. My name is Emmett Calhoun. Last night, May 18th, I saw Sheriff Kincaid and Deputies Lowell and Stein moving packages from the evidence room into unmarked vans. They didn't see me. I was waiting for Dad to finish work. When they left, I checked Dad's files and found records of seizures that never made it to the state logs. Kincaid lunged forward, but Briggs stepped back, turning up the volume. The next voice froze every man in place. Kincaid's voice, 17 years younger but unmistakable. Marcus Calhoun is a problem that needs solving. Him and that DA handler of his. The wife too, probably. Clean sweep. Make it look like a break-in gone bad. No witnesses. The files go to me directly afterward. Understood. Another voice answered. What about the kids? They're usually there. Collateral damage if necessary. Kincaid's recorded voice replied coldly. But try for a school night. Less complications. Briggs stopped the tape. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain. Those are your orders, Briggs said quietly. To murder my entire family. In your own voice. Deputy Walsh lowered his weapon entirely. Jesus Christ, Sheriff. It's fake, Kincaid snapped. Obviously doctored. Calhoun's trying to divert attention from his own corruption. What about Jazz Beaumont? Deputy Donovan asked. What's his connection to all this? Before Kincaid could answer, Briggs pulled another item from the box. The photo of his father with Eliza and Jazz Beaumont. Jazz is my half-brother, Briggs explained. But that's not all. He's been protecting Emmett all these years. Emmett is dead, Kincaid insisted, but something in his eyes wavered. No, Briggs said with growing certainty. He's not. That's why Jazz took the fall for the church fire. Isn't it? To protect Emmett. To keep him hidden from you. Your brother saw too much that night, Kincaid growled. Just like you're seeing too much now. The sheriff raised his gun higher, finger tightening on the trigger. The three deputies stood frozen, caught between loyalty and the horrific truth unfolding before them. You planning to kill for officers tonight, Sheriff? Briggs asked calmly. Might be hard to explain. Dead men tell no tales, Kincaid replied, his face a mask of cold determination. Road accidents happen all the time on rainy nights. Deputy Ramirez moved first, stepping away from Kincaid. Sheriff, lower your weapon. We need to take this in, sort it out properly. That's an order, Deputy, Kincaid barked. Not following that order, sir, Ramirez replied, turning his own gun toward the sheriff. Not after what I just heard. Walsh followed suit, though his hands shook visibly. Put it down, Sheriff. Please. Only Donovan remained torn. His weapon still pointed vaguely in Briggs's direction. This can't be right, he muttered. Not the sheriff. Not for 20 years. 20 years of moving drugs through this county, Briggs said. 20 years of profit built on my family's blood. And a convenient scapegoat on death row, Ramirez added, the full picture clearly dawning on him. Kincaid's eyes darted between his deputies, calculating odds that worsened by the second. You're making a mistake. All of you. Only mistake was trusting you, Briggs replied. Where's Emmett? Kincaid? Tell me now. The sheriff's laugh was hollow. You really don't know, do you? After all this time, your precious brother has been right under your nose for years. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating Kincaid's face in stark relief. For the first time, Briggs saw fear there. What do you mean? Briggs demanded. Ask your half-brother before he dies, Kincaid sneered. If you can make it back in time. Briggs checked his watch. 11:15 p.m. 45 minutes until the execution. In that moment of distraction, Kincaid moved. Not toward Briggs, but toward his vehicle. Ramirez fired a warning shot. The bullet pinged off metal, sending a shower of sparks into the rain-soaked night. Stop right there, Ramirez shouted. But Kincaid was already diving into his SUV. The engine roared to life. Tires spun in mud, then caught. The vehicle lurched forward, straight toward Briggs. Briggs dove to the side, clutching the precious metal box. Gunshots rang out as Ramirez and Walsh fired at the SUV's tires. Glass shattered. The vehicle swerved violently, then straightened, fishtailing down the road into the darkness. You okay? Ramirez asked, helping Briggs to his feet. He's getting away, Briggs gasped. Not for long, Walsh said, already on his radio. All units, this is Deputy Walsh. Sheriff Kincaid is wanted for questioning in connection with multiple homicides. Last seen heading south on Farm Road 1960 in a department SUV with shot-out rear window. Briggs staggered to his truck, mind reeling. Emmett alive, right under his nose. What did that mean? Where are you going? Donovan called, looking shell-shocked. Huntsville, Briggs replied, sliding behind the wheel. I've got a brother to save. The metal box sat beside him on the passenger seat, 17 years of buried truth finally unearthed. But the most important truth was still waiting at the prison. Jazz knew where Emmett was. Jazz had been protecting him all along. And Jazz had less than 45 minutes to live. 11:30 p.m. The prison loomed ahead like a fortress of concrete and steel, its floodlights cutting through the rain-soaked night. Briggs gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white, the speedometer needle trembling just past 90. The metal box bounced on the seat beside him, 17 years of buried truth rattling with each curve in the road. His radio crackled with updates. Sheriff Kincaid's SUV spotted near the county line. Roadblocks being established. State police joining the manhunt. None of it mattered now. All that mattered was reaching Jazz before midnight. The prison gates appeared, and Briggs slammed on his brakes, fishtailing slightly on the wet asphalt. The guard at the checkpoint recognized him instantly. "Officer Calhoun? Thought you had a family emergency." "I do," Briggs said, flashing his badge. "Need to see Warden Phillips immediately. It's about tonight's execution." The guard's eyes widened, but he raised the gate. "Better hurry. They're already prepping the chamber." Briggs gunned the engine, tires squealing as he raced toward the administration building. Rain lashed his face as he sprinted from the truck, clutching the metal box against his chest. Inside, chaos greeted him. Officers rushing about, radios squawking with news of Kincaid's flight. "Calhoun!" Warden Phillips spotted him from across the lobby. "What the hell is going on? I've got state police calling about Sheriff Kincaid. Deputies saying something about murder confessions, and you're supposed to be at your aunt's bedside." "Sir, we need to stop the execution," Briggs gasped, holding up the box. "Jazz Beaumont is innocent of the church fire. I have proof." The warden's face hardened. "That's not how this works, officer. There's a process for new evidence. Appeals. Reviews. We don't have time for process. The real killer is still out there, and an innocent man dies at midnight." As they argued, the main doors swung open again. A figure entered, water streaming from a black raincoat. A priest, face partially obscured by his hood, clutching a Bible against his chest. "Father Emmanuel," the warden acknowledged with a nod. "You're right on time." The priest lowered his hood, revealing a solemn face perhaps 40 years old, with kind eyes that seemed to carry the weight of too many deaths witnessed. "I'm here for Mr. Beaumont's last rites." Something about the priest's voice made Briggs pause. Something familiar that tugged at the edges of memory. "They can't go through with it," Briggs insisted to the warden, tearing his gaze away from the priest. Jazz Beaumont was framed. Sheriff Kincaid used him to cover up murders he committed. The priest's Bible slipped from his fingers, thudding against the tile floor. Briggs turned at the sound, meeting the man's wide eyes. "What did you say about Sheriff Kincaid?" Father Emmanuel asked, his voice tight with what sounded like fear. Before Briggs could answer, the warden's phone rang. He listened for a moment, his expression growing increasingly grave. "I understand." "Yes, sir. Right away." He hung up, looking shaken. That was the governor's office. They're issuing a 30-day stay of execution for Jasper Beaumont, pending new evidence. Relief flooded through Briggs so powerfully his knees nearly buckled. "Then we need to see him. Now." "The priest goes first," the warden said firmly. "Protocol. You can see Beaumont after his spiritual counseling." Father Emmanuel bent to retrieve his Bible with slightly trembling hands. "I won't be long," he assured them. As the priest followed a guard toward death row, Briggs caught himself staring after him. Something about his movements, his voice, the metal box suddenly felt heavier in his arms. The photos inside, his father's letter, Jazz's cryptic words echoing in his memory. "Your brother has been closer than you know, watching you, praying for you every Sunday." "Oh my God," Briggs whispered. Without waiting for permission, he sprinted down the corridor after the priest, ignoring the warden's shouts. The guard had already unlocked the secure door to death row, allowing Father Emmanuel through. Briggs slipped in behind them just before it closed. "Officer Calhoun," the guard protested. You can't be here until the priest is finished. It's okay, Frank, Briggs said, forcing a calm he didn't feel. I'll wait right here. Won't interfere. The guard hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Then we move Beaumont to the holding cell. Briggs watched as Father Emmanuel approached Jazz's cell. The condemned man sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, fingers tapping that endless rhythm against his knee. At the sound of footsteps, Jazz looked up and smiled. Right on time, he said softly. All of you. Father Emmanuel gripped the bars, knuckles white. Is it true? About Kincaid. Jazz nodded slowly. He's been exposed. The truth is out now. The priest's shoulders sagged with what looked like 17 years of relief. Then it wasn't for nothing. Never was, Jazz replied. Though your brother cut it closer than I would have liked. Briggs felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Your brother. Not Officer Calhoun. Your brother. He stepped forward. The metal box clutched against his chest like a shield. Father Emmanuel? The priest turned, startled by Briggs's voice. Their eyes met, really met, for what felt like the first time. Briggs saw what he'd been blind to all these years. The eyes. Their mother's eyes. Emmett? He whispered, the name feeling strange on his tongue after so many years. The priest's face crumpled, years of careful composure dissolving in an instant. Briggs, he said, voice breaking. I wanted to tell you, so many times, but it wasn't safe. The world narrowed to this impossible moment. Briggs moved closer, studying every feature of the stranger's face, finding his little brother in the man before him. How had he not seen it? How had he looked at this face during Sunday services for years and not recognized his own blood? Show him, Emmett, Jess said quietly from his cell. Show him the mark. With trembling fingers, Father Emmanuel Emmett turned his head and pushed back the hair above his right ear. There, just where it had always been, was the crescent-shaped birthmark. The Calhoun moon, their mother had called it. It's really you, Briggs breathed, reaching out to touch his brother's face. All this time, you've been here, alive. The guard watched in bewilderment as the officer and priest embraced, 17 years of loss collapsing in a single heartbeat. I'm sorry, Emmett whispered against Briggs's shoulder. I wanted to tell you. Jazz said it wasn't safe. Not until Kincaid was exposed. Briggs pulled back, looking between his long-lost brother and the man in the cell. How? How did this happen? Jazz gestured for them both to come closer. We don't have much time. They've only delayed the inevitable. The execution's been stayed, Briggs told him. 30 days. Jazz smiled sadly. Kincaid still has friends in high places. 30 days just gives them time to clean up loose ends. Like us. Tell me everything, Briggs demanded. Right now. The night they attacked our home, Emmett began, voice steadying as he slipped into a story he'd carried alone for too long. They killed Mom and Dad. You were unconscious. They dragged me out to a waiting car. I thought I was dead for sure. Who took you? Briggs asked. Kincaid's men. Deputies Lowell and Stein. They were arguing about what to do with me. Then another car pulled up. Emmett glanced at Jazz. He saved my life that night. Jazz's fingers had stopped their tapping, coming to rest peacefully on his knees. I'd been watching your family for years, he explained. Ever since I learned Marcus Calhoun was my father too. Dad's other son, Briggs murmured, the photo from the box vivid in his mind. He never abandoned us, Jazz continued. Supported my mother and me, visited when he could. When I was 20, he told me about his undercover work, about his other family, about you and Emmett. He was trying to bring us all together, Emmett added. Had been for years, slowly. That picnic when we were kids? You don't remember because they drugged your lemonade. Dad wasn't ready for everyone to know yet. Briggs's head spun with revelations. So the night of the attack, I'd been following Dad's investigation, Jazz said. I knew he was getting close to exposing Kincaid. When I heard radio chatter about a hit on your family's address, I raced there. Too late for your parents. Too late for you to see me. but not too late for Emmett. He pretended to be one of them, Emmett continued. Told Lowell and Stein that Kincaid wanted me taken somewhere for questioning first. They were too stupid to check. Once we were clear, Jazz got me to a friend in the Federal Witness Protection Program. New name, Jazz added. New life, new identity. Emmanuel Grace, a priest of all things. It was the perfect cover, Emmett said. Who looks too closely at a man of God? I could move between parishes, keep my head down, check on you from a distance. But the church fire, Briggs said, turning to Jazz. You've been on death row for 15 years for killing 3 people. Jazz and Emmett exchanged a look heavy with shared knowledge. I didn't kill anyone in that church, Jazz said softly. Neither did I. Then why confess? Why spend 15 years waiting for execution? Because Kincaid's men found Emmett, Jazz explained. 5 years after the attack on your family. He'd been hidden in Little Faith Baptist Church by Pastor Green, who knew our father. The pastor was helping move Emmett to a new location when Kincaid's men tracked them down. Emmett's eyes filled with tears. I was hiding in the back room. They didn't know I was there. They started threatening the pastor, demanding to know where I was. The Wilkins couple arrived for their counseling session. Wrong place, wrong time. What happened? Briggs asked, though part of him already knew. I panicked, Emmett whispered. Knocked over candles trying to find a way out the back. The old wooden floor caught fire immediately. The doors were never chained. That was added to the story later. But the fire spread so fast. No one got out. The weight of it settled over them. 3 innocent deaths. A tragedy, not a murder. By the time I got there, the church was engulfed, Jazz continued. Emmett was hiding in the woods, in shock. The fire department was on its way. And I knew if they found him, if anyone connected him to those deaths, Kincaid would find him too. So I made a choice. He confessed, Emmett said, voice breaking. Left evidence for them to find. His fingerprints, his boot prints. Took the fall completely. Why? Briggs asked, staring at his half-brother in disbelief. Why sacrifice your life? Jazz smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his solemn face. Because that's what family does. Your father protected me and my mother when he didn't have to. I protected his son when he couldn't anymore. I begged him not to, Emmett said. Tried to turn myself in multiple times. But Jazz had friends in the system. They blocked every attempt, made sure my confessions were lost or dismissed as attention-seeking. It was the only way to keep him safe from Kincaid, Jazz insisted. A convicted murderer's claims about police corruption would never be taken seriously. But a respected priest could slowly, carefully gather evidence. Build a case over years. The visits, Briggs realized. You've been coming here every week for spiritual counseling. Emmett nodded. Building the case. Finding witnesses. Tracking money. All while Jazz kept Kincaid's attention focused on him, not on finding me. I kept my promise, Jazz said softly, eyes moving between the brothers. To keep you both safe until the truth could come out. Outside the cell, the guard cleared his throat. Time's up, father. They need to move the prisoner. Briggs turned to the guard, authority filling his voice. Give us 5 more minutes, Frank. This is official business now. The guard hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. No more. As he stepped away, Briggs looked between his brothers. One lost and found. One never known until too late. We need to get you both out of here. Kincaid is still free, still dangerous. The evidence in that box, Jazz said, nodding toward Briggs's arms. Is it enough? More than enough. Your confession, Dad's letter, financial records, Emmett's testimony. Then there's only one thing left to do, Emmett said, squaring his shoulders with new resolve. It's time for me to stop hiding. 11:50 p.m. The prison clock ticked like a time bomb counting down their lives. 10 minutes to midnight. 10 minutes until the 30-day stay became meaningless. Because Jazz had a secret no one could outrun. Warden Phillips appeared at the end of the corridor. his face a storm cloud of confusion and authority. Officer Calhoun, I need your statement now. The governor's office is waiting. Briggs held up a hand, buying precious seconds. 5 more minutes, sir. Please. The warden checked his watch with obvious irritation. 5 minutes. Then I need everything you have on record. As the warden retreated, Briggs turned back to his brothers. His mind still reeled from the impossible truth. Emmett alive. Jazz, a brother he never knew existed. Their shared blood. Their shared tragedy. The stay won't matter, Jazz said quietly, his calm more unsettling than panic would have been. Some sins can't be postponed, only paid for. Emmett gripped the cell bars so tight his knuckles blanched white. Don't say that. The evidence proves you didn't kill anyone in that church. But I did kill, Jazz replied, his eyes finding Briggs with unflinching honesty. Another fire. Another time. The air between them thickened with unspoken truth. Briggs felt the weight of the metal box in his arms. Evidence that could save one brother while condemning another. What did you do? Briggs asked, the question barely a whisper. Jazz's fingers resumed their rhythmic tapping, but slower now. Funeral march tempo. Remember that trafficking ring they busted in Houston 12 years ago? The one where someone burned down the house with 3 men inside. Briggs remembered. Every cop in Texas remembered. 3 men charred beyond recognition. A house of horrors discovered in the ashes. Children's clothes. Chains bolted to basement walls. Evidence of unspeakable crimes. That was you? Briggs asked, though he already knew the answer. Jazz nodded once, his eyes never leaving Briggs's face. They had my daughter. My Melody. Daughter. The word struck Briggs like a physical blow. You have a child? Had. Jazz corrected, the single word containing oceans of grief. Melody was 6 when they took her. 8 when I finally tracked her to that house. Emmett made a small, wounded sound. Jazz, don't. He needs to know why I'm really here, Jazz insisted. Why I accepted this fate long before they caught me. Briggs leaned closer to the bars, the scent of prison disinfectant burning his nostrils. Tell me. I was 22 when Melody was born. Her mother died during childbirth. I raised her alone with help from my mother. Jazz's voice remained steady, but his eyes held ancient pain. When Melody was 6, she vanished from a playground. Just gone. Police searched for 3 days, then moved on to fresher cases. But you didn't stop looking, Briggs said. 2 years, Jazz confirmed. 2 years of searching, following every lead, using every connection. I found her in that house in Houston. You could have called police, Briggs said, but the words rang hollow even to his own ears. Jazz's laugh held no humor. The men who had her war badges, Briggs. Just like the men who killed our father. Just like the men hunting Emmett. A chill ran down Briggs's spine. Kincaid's operation. Drugs were just the beginning, Jazz continued. Human trafficking brought in the real money. And who better to run it than cops? Who would suspect? Who would believe the victims if they talked? Emmett pressed his forehead against the bars. Jazz got me out before he went after them. Made sure I was safe first. What happened to Melody? Briggs asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Jazz's fingers stilled completely. I was too late. By the time I found that house, she was already gone. What they left behind wasn't my little girl anymore. The silence that followed held more anguish than words could express. So I burned it down, Jazz said finally. With them inside. Made sure they couldn't escape. Made sure they felt every second of what they'd done to those children. To my child. Briggs struggled to breathe. The moral weight of his brother's confession pressed against his chest like stone. The trafficking house wasn't discovered because of the fire, he said slowly, putting pieces together. It was discovered because you made sure an anonymous tip reached the right people afterward. Jazz nodded. 26 children rescued from their network after those 3 died. Would have been more if I'd gone to the authorities first. But those 3 men weren't the only ones, Briggs continued, the horrible truth dawning. They worked for Kincaid too, part of the same operation. The same men who helped kill our parents, Jazz confirmed. The same men hunting Emmett. The prison clock ticked louder. 7 minutes to midnight. Emmett grabbed Briggs's arm. You have to help him. The church fire wasn't his fault. It was mine. But the trafficking house was his choice, Briggs replied, the words tasting bitter. 3 men, burned alive. That's murder, Emmett. No court would see it differently. They were monsters, Emmett insisted, tears streaming down his face. You didn't see what Jazz saw. What I saw. The law doesn't work that way, Briggs said, the badge on his chest suddenly heavier than it had ever been. The law, Jazz said quietly, has never protected our family. Our father tried to use the law. Look what happened to him. Briggs paced the narrow corridor, mind racing. The governor's stay buys us time. 30 days to build a case against Kincaid. To prove the church fire wasn't murder. And then what? Jazz asked. I trade the injection for life in prison? They find out about Houston? About the other fires? Briggs froze mid-step. Other fires? Jazz held his gaze steadily. Every trafficker I could find. Every person connected to what happened to Melody. 7 houses. 15 men. I hunted them for 3 years before I took the fall for the church. The revelation hit Briggs like a truck. His half-brother wasn't just a vigilante. He was a serial killer, burning away a network of evil one house at a time. Emmett clutched his Bible, knuckles white. He saved me, Briggs. He protected me all these years. By killing 15 people, Briggs replied, his voice hoarse. By saving dozens of children, Emmett countered. By stopping men who wore badges and used them to traffic innocent lives. 5 minutes to midnight. The warden's footsteps echoed down the corridor as he approached again. Time's up, Officer Calhoun. I need that statement now. Briggs looked between his brothers. Emmett, the priest who had lived in shadows for 17 years. Jazz, the killer who had sacrificed everything to protect what remained of their family. What do you want me to do? He asked Jazz, the question heavy with impossible choices. Jazz smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his solemn face. I made my peace with this years ago, brother. The moment I lit that first match, I knew where I'd end up. He doesn't deserve to die, Emmett pleaded, gripping Briggs's arm. Not for saving me. Not for saving those children. Some sins can't be forgiven, Jazz said softly. Only paid for. The warden cleared his throat impatiently. Officer Calhoun. Now. Briggs looked down at the metal box in his arms. Evidence that could save Jazz from the church fire conviction, but evidence that would inevitably lead to questions about the other fires. Other deaths. A trail of vigilante justice that would end in the same execution chamber. Just delayed. Did you know? Briggs asked Emmett suddenly. About the fires? About what he was doing while protecting you? Emmett's face crumpled. Not at first. By the time I figured it out, it was too late to stop him. He made me promise not to interfere. Said it was his burden to carry, not mine. Our father's first family, Briggs murmured. All these years, he was watching over us from the shadows. Marcus Calhoun was a good man, Jazz said. When my mother told him she was pregnant, he didn't run, didn't hide. He supported us, loved us as best he could while balancing 2 families. When he died, I promised myself I'd protect what was left of his legacy. His sons, Briggs realized. Us. Jazz nodded. The night they killed him, I lost a father too. 3 minutes to midnight. Officer Calhoun, the warden said, his patience clearly exhausted. Final warning. Briggs turned to face him, decision crystallizing in his mind. Sir, the evidence I've discovered proves Jasper Beaumont is innocent of the church fire. The blaze was accidentally started by a witness hiding from Sheriff Kincaid's men. The warden's eyebrows shot up. And this witness? Emmett stepped forward, shoulders squared with resolve 17 years in the making. Me, sir. Emmett Calhoun. I've been in hiding since the night my parents were murdered on Sheriff Kincaid's orders. Jesus Christ, the warden breathed, looking between the 3 men with dawning comprehension. Your brothers. Half-brothers, Briggs confirmed. Jazz is our father's son from a previous relationship. This is highly irregular, the warden said, clearly struggling to process the implications. The stay of execution stands, but there will need to be a full investigation, statements, evidence properly processed. Of course, Briggs agreed, handing over the metal box. Everything you need is here. Financial records proving Kincaid's corruption. My father's letter explaining his undercover work. Testimony from my brother Emmett about the church fire. 2 minutes to midnight. Jazz watched the exchange from his cell, his expression peaceful. When the warden stepped away to call the governor's office, he caught Briggs's eye. You know this only delays the inevitable, he said quietly. The truth about the other fires will come out during their investigation. One battle at a time, Briggs replied. Right now, we focus on keeping you alive and bringing Kincaid down. Jazz's fingers tapped out one final rhythm against his knee. Some sins can't be outrun, brother. The only question is whether I face them on my feet or lying down. 1 minute to midnight. Emmett reached through the bars, grasping Jazz's hand. You saved my life. Now let us save yours. Jazz's smile was tinged with sadness. I didn't save you so you could watch me die slower, little brother. I saved you so you could live. The prison clock began to chime, the sound echoing through the concrete corridors like a funeral bell. Midnight, the execution that wouldn't happen tonight, but loomed on a horizon Jazz clearly believed was unavoidable. Briggs watched his half-brother's face as the final chime faded into silence. The face of a killer, the face of a protector, the impossible moral weight of a man who had burned away evil with fire, knowing the price would eventually be his own life. What happens now? Emmett asked, his voice small in the sudden quiet. Now, Briggs said, placing one hand on the priest's shoulder and the other on the cell bars near Jazz's fingers. We fight for justice. Real justice. Not just for us, but for Melody. For all of them. Jazz nodded, understanding passing between them. Kincaid's still out there. And he's not alone. As if summoned by his name, alarms began blaring throughout the prison. Red emergency lights flooded the corridor. The warden came running back, face pale with shock. Lockdown. We have reports of an armed intruder in the administrative section. Briggs's hand went to his service weapon. Kincaid. He wouldn't be stupid enough to come here, the warden protested. He would if he had nothing left to lose, Jazz said, rising to his feet with fluid grace. If the only thing left was silencing the 3 men who could destroy him, the brothers exchanged one look, 17 years of secrets and sacrifice culminating in this moment of perfect understanding. The clock had struck midnight, but their true reckoning was only beginning. 12:15 a.m. The alarms stopped as suddenly as they had begun. False alarm, the guard announced, returning to the death row corridor. Someone tripped a sensor outside. Security has cleared the perimeter. Briggs released the breath he'd been holding, holstering his weapon. The momentary relief vanished when the warden approached, his face grim with unwelcome news. The governor just called, he said, voice low. The stay has been revoked. What? Emmett gasped. How is that possible? Apparently, the warden replied. New evidence was presented to the governor's office regarding other crimes committed by Jasper Beaumont. Multiple arson cases. Multiple deaths. Jazz closed his eyes, nodding slightly as if he'd expected nothing less. Kincaid works fast. This is insane, Briggs protested. You can't just revoke a stay of execution minutes after granting it. These are direct orders, the warden said, not meeting his eyes. The execution proceeds as scheduled. Guards appeared at the end of the corridor, solemn-faced men who had performed this duty too many times. One carried the traditional white uniform for the condemned. No, Emmett whispered, gripping the cell bars. You can't do this. Jazz stood calmly. It's okay, little brother. This was always how it would end. Briggs felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, choices and consequences colliding like tectonic plates. He could fight this, draw his weapon, create a standoff, buy time. But time for what? The evidence about the other fires existed. Jazz had admitted to killing 15 people. Not innocent people, but human beings who had faced no trial, no jury, only his vengeful flames. The law was clear. The punishment fixed. Is there anything I can do? Briggs asked, his voice barely audible. Jazz smiled, that gentle smile that transformed his solemn face. Bear witness, brother. That's all any of us can do in the end. The cell door slid open. Jazz stepped forward, offering his wrists for the cuffs without resistance. The guards seemed surprised by his calm. You have 5 minutes to say your goodbyes, the senior guard announced. Emmett grabbed Jazz's hands, tears streaming down his face. This isn't right. After everything you sacrificed for me. My choices were my own, Jazz replied softly. Never yours to carry. He turned to Briggs, their father's eyes looking back at him. The metal box contains everything you need to bring down Kincaid and his network. Use it. Briggs nodded, throat too tight for words. There's something else, Jazz continued. A safety deposit box at First National Bank in Houston. Keys taped under my mattress. The contents belong to both of you. What's in it? Emmett asked. The truth, Jazz replied simply. The whole truth. My confession, my testimony, records of everyone involved in the trafficking ring. And something for you, Briggs. Something from our father. The guards stepped forward. Time to go. Jazz nodded, accepting his fate with dignity that made Briggs's heart ache. As they led him away, he glanced back once. Remember what I told you about dead men and tales? Sometimes they speak the loudest. The walk to the execution chamber felt like a funeral procession. Jazz in white, flanked by guards. Briggs and Emmett following behind, united in grief for a brother they'd barely known. The warden led them to the witness room, a small space with chairs facing a large window. Beyond the glass, the execution chamber waited. Sterile, clinical, the gurney with its leather straps, the 4-stand, the clock on the wall reading 11:59 p.m. Last chance to stop this, Emmett whispered desperately. Briggs watched as the door to the chamber opened and Jazz was led inside. The impossible weight of justice and mercy crushed down on his shoulders. His half-brother was a killer 15 times over. He had burned men alive without trial or appeal. But he had also saved Emmett, protected him for 17 years, sacrificed his freedom, his future, everything to keep his family safe. The minute hand clicked to midnight. Decision time. We can't stop this, Briggs said finally, the words tasting like ash. But we can make sure his sacrifice matters. We can finish what he started. Jazz was secured to the gurney, straps tightened across his chest, arms, legs. A doctor inserted the 4-line with practiced efficiency. The warden entered, reading the official death warrant in a monotone that stripped all humanity from the proceedings. Does the condemned have any final words? The warden asked. Jazz turned his head toward the window, finding his brothers with unerring accuracy despite the glass being mirrored on his side. Emmett, he said clearly, his voice carrying through the speakers. Tell him about the real fire, the one I actually set. Emmett staggered as if physically struck, gripping the back of a chair to stay upright. The first drug entered the 4-line. Jazz's eyes remained fixed on his brothers as his body gradually relaxed, tension melting away with each passing second. I forgive you, he whispered, words barely picked up by the microphone. Both of you, for everything. The second drug followed. Jazz's breathing slowed visibly. No, Emmett moaned, sliding to his knees. No, no, no. The third drug administered. Jazz's eyes fluttered once, twice, then stilled, open and unseeing. The doctor approached, checking for vital signs. The clock on the wall read 12:13 a.m. Time of death, 12:13 a.m., the doctor announced. Emmett broke. There was no other word for the primal sound that tore from his throat as he collapsed completely, 17 years of secrets bursting free like water through a shattered dam. They were traffickers, he screamed, rocking back and forth on the floor. The people in the church. Pastor Green wasn't a pastor. The Wilkins weren't a married couple. They used that church as a front for their operation. Briggs knelt beside his brother, trying to make sense of his broken confession. Jazz found out after he took the blame for me, Emmett continued, words tumbling out between sobs. They were part of Kincaid's network. The same people who took his daughter Melody. What? Briggs whispered, the horrible truth beginning to dawn. The real fire, Emmett gasped, clutching Briggs's shirt. The one he confessed to. He didn't kill innocent people. He killed monsters who were using that church to move children through the county. When he discovered who they really were, he kept the confession. Let everyone believe he'd murdered innocents. Briggs looked through the window at his half-brother's still form. Why would he do that? Why not tell the truth? Because the truth about who they were would have led back to Kincaid, Emmett explained, his voice hollow with grief. Back to the trafficking network. Back to me in hiding. He chose to be remembered as a monster rather than expose the truth and risk my safety. The warden stood in the doorway, clearly having overheard everything. Is this true? Every word, Emmett confirmed, rising shakily to his feet. I can prove it. The safety deposit box Jazz mentioned. It contains everything. Records of the trafficking network. Names, dates, the true identities of Pastor Green and the Wilkins couple. And his daughter? Briggs asked gently. Melody? Emmett's face crumpled again. She was 8 when they found her in that house in Houston. The things they did to her. He stopped, unable to continue. Jazz never recovered from it. That's when the fires started. One by one, he hunted down everyone connected to her death. The house in Houston was just the first. Briggs remembered the news reports, the mysterious fires targeting what appeared to be random individuals across 3 states. The bodies found in the ashes, all with connections to criminal enterprises that only became clear after their deaths. He chose which crime to confess to, Briggs said slowly, understanding dawning. He could have admitted to killing traffickers, been seen as a vigilante hero. Instead, he confessed to killing innocent people in a church, knowing it would make everyone see him as a monster. Because a monster wouldn't be questioned too deeply, the warden realized. A monster's claims about police corruption would be dismissed. While he built his case against Kincaid from inside, Briggs finished. Protected Emmett, gathered evidence, planned for this moment. A guard appeared at the door, holding a small envelope. Sir, the prisoner left this to be delivered after it was done. The warden took the envelope, handing it to Briggs. It's addressed to both of you. With trembling fingers, Briggs opened it. Inside was a single key and a note. Locker 42, Huntsville Bus Station. A recorded confession. My story in my words. Use it to finish what our father started. Jazz. Emmett touched the key reverently. He knew. He knew all along they'd find a way to push through the execution. He planned for everything, Briggs agreed, a terrible admiration filling him. Right up to his final moment. Through the window, medical staff were preparing to remove Jazz's body. In death, his face held a peace Briggs had never seen there in life. The burden of 17 years of sacrifice lifted at last. What do we do now? Emmett asked, clutching his brother's arm. Briggs pocketed the key, his grief crystallizing into resolve. We finish it. We bring down Kincaid and everyone connected to him. We make sure Jazz's death wasn't for nothing. As they left the witness room, Briggs glanced back one last time at his half-brother's still form. A man who had burned away evil with fire, knowing the price would eventually be his own life. Some sins can't be forgiven, Briggs murmured, echoing Jazz's words. Only paid for. But as they walked toward the locker that held Jazz's final testimony, Briggs wondered if perhaps forgiveness was possible after all. Not from the law with its rigid definitions of justice. Not from society with its black and white view of right and wrong. But from the brothers who now carried his legacy. From the family he had protected at the cost of his soul. The clock read 12:15 a.m. Jazz Beaumont was gone. But his fire was about to spread. 3 months later, Texas sunshine spilled across the courthouse steps as Sheriff Roy Kincaid emerged in handcuffs, flanked by federal agents. His weathered face had aged decades in 3 short months. Gone was the powerful lawman who had terrorized Mender County for 20 years. In his place stood a broken man facing the remainder of his life behind bars. The reporters surged forward, microphones thrust toward District Attorney Helena Vasquez as she announced the verdict. Justice has been served today. Roy Kincaid has been sentenced to life without parole for the murders of Marcus and Sarah Calhoun, for conspiracy to traffic minors, for obstruction of justice, and for corruption under color of authority. Briggs Calhoun watched from across the street, his face impassive as his former mentor was loaded into a prison transport van. Beside him, Emmett stood silent, still wearing his priest's collar, though a hint of hesitation had entered his eyes whenever someone called him Father Emmanuel these days. 12 other officers going down with him, Briggs remarked, watching the convoy pull away. The whole network crumbled like a house of cards once Jazz's evidence went public. Emmett nodded, his gaze distant. He planned everything so carefully, right down to the timing of the evidence release after his death. The brothers turned away from the courthouse, walking toward the black Mustang parked at the curb. Jazz's car, one of many possessions unexpectedly left to them in a will neither knew existed until after his execution. "Ready?" Briggs asked, sliding behind the wheel. Emmett settled into the passenger seat. "As I'll ever be." The drive to the cemetery took 30 minutes, most of it in contemplative silence. So much had changed in 3 months, so much revealed, so much rebuilt from the ashes of their shattered family. The cemetery was small, peaceful, tucked away on the outskirts of Houston. No grand monuments or ornate headstones, just simple markers and the whisper of wind through ancient oak trees. Jazz's grave sat beneath one such oak, unmarked except for a small stone bearing only his initials, JMB. No dates, no epitaph, nothing to hint at the complex man who lay beneath. Briggs placed a bouquet of wildflowers against the stone. The same wildflowers that grew along Highway 290, the ones Jazz had mentioned during those long drives to medical appointments. "I still can't believe he watched over us all those years," Emmett said, kneeling beside the grave. "Ever since Dad died." "Dad's first son," Briggs replied, the reality of it still strange on his tongue. "The big brother we never knew we had." The truth about their father had emerged from Jazz's safety deposit box like buried treasure. Marcus Calhoun, decorated DEA agent, deep cover operative for 5 years, infiltrating not just drug operations but a sprawling human trafficking network that stretched across 3 states. Dad was trying to bring down the entire organization, Emmett said. Not just the drug running, but the trafficking too. And when they killed him, Jazz picked up where he left off, Briggs added. His own way. The wind rustled the oak leaves overhead, nature's whispered eulogy for a man most of the world would only remember as a murderer. The trafficking ring was bigger than anyone knew, Emmett said quietly. Jazz's records identified over 30 high-level operatives, judges, politicians, business leaders. All going down now, Briggs confirmed. The FBI raid last week picked up the last of them. From his pocket, Emmett withdrew a small photograph. Melody Beaumont at 6 years old, dark curls framing a smiling face so like her father's. Her grave has a headstone now, first time since she died. Briggs nodded, throat tight. They had visited Melody's grave earlier that morning. A small marker in a children's cemetery, previously unmarked for fear of connection to Jazz, now properly honored with her name, her dates, and the simple epitaph, "Beloved daughter, forever our Melody." 26 children rescued after the Houston fire, Emmett continued. 43 more from subsequent raids triggered by Jazz's evidence. Dozens of lives saved through his flames. The brothers fell silent, each lost in private reflection of the man who had burned away evil to protect the innocent, accepting damnation as the price. "The renovations on the club are almost finished," Briggs said finally. "Grand opening next month." Jazz's other surprise, a jazz club in downtown Houston, Blue Note, a successful business he had run through managers while on death row, now transformed into something more. Beaumont House, Emmett said, tasting the new name. A shelter for trafficking survivors. Jazz planned that too. Left detailed instructions. Along with enough money to run it for 20 years, Briggs added. The final shock of Jazz's will. Substantial investments, property holdings, legitimate businesses built over years. All left to the brothers he had protected from afar. Emmett fingered his clerical collar, the gesture unconscious but revealing. I'm giving notice next week. To the diocese. You're sure about leaving the priesthood? Briggs asked gently. It was never really my calling, Emmett admitted. It was protective coloration. A role I played so long I almost believed it myself. What will you do instead? Emmett's smile held echoes of Jazz's. Help you run Beaumont Justice, of course. The investigation firm needs both of us. Another item from Jazz's meticulous planning. Office space. Licenses. Frameworks for a private investigation firm specializing in finding missing children. Beaumont Justice. He thought of everything, Briggs said, still amazed at the extent of their half-brother's preparations. Including your resignation from law enforcement, Emmett reminded him. The badge no longer weighed down Briggs's pocket. He had turned it in 2 weeks after Jazz's execution, along with a detailed statement about systemic corruption he had witnessed. His former colleagues hadn't known whether to call him hero or traitor. Briggs hadn't cared either way. From a small backpack, Emmett withdrew 2 items. A portable speaker and a slim leather case containing sheet music. There's something I need to show you, he said, setting up the speaker and connecting his phone. The smooth opening notes of Miles Davis filled the quiet cemetery air. Kind of blue. Jazz's favorite. During those prison visits, Emmett explained, opening the leather case, everyone thought I was providing spiritual counseling. What they didn't know was that Jazz was teaching me piano. Through the glass. Just with words and hand movements. He taught you piano in a prison visiting room? Briggs asked incredulously. Emmett nodded. Said it was our family legacy. The gift that skipped you. Briggs laughed despite himself. He had that right. Before the end, he gave me this, Emmett continued, removing sheets of handwritten music from the case. His final composition. He called it Mercy's Melody. The name hit Briggs like a physical blow. For his daughter. For all of them, Emmett corrected gently. All the children he couldn't save. All the ones he did. As Miles Davis played his somber, beautiful notes, Emmett pointed to specific markings on the sheet music. Briggs leaned closer, confused at first, then understanding dawned. Those aren't just musical notations, he breathed. They're coordinates. 14 sets, Emmett confirmed. 1 for each site where children were rescued because of Jazz's information. The melody creates a map across Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. Every location where his actions saved lives. Briggs traced the patterns with his finger, seeing his half-brother's genius in a whole new light. And those first coordinates he gave me, the location where you dug up the box, Emmett finished, now marked with a memorial stone, the first point on the map. They sat in silence as Miles Davis gave way to the next track. The melody shifted, became something both familiar and new. A piano composition neither had heard before. Is this Mercy's Melody? Emmett confirmed. Jazz arranged for a pianist to record it before his execution. His final gift to us. The music flowed around them like water, like flame, like life itself. Haunting yet hopeful, dark yet reaching toward light, complex yet beautifully simple, just like the man who composed it. He wore 2 faces his whole life, Briggs said quietly. The vigilante who burned evil from the world. The brother who sacrificed everything to protect us. Justice and redemption, Emmett replied. 2 sides of the same coin. 2 faces of the same man. As the final notes of Mercy's Melody faded into the Texas afternoon, Briggs placed his hand on the simple stone marking his brother's grave. We only knew him for a moment, he said. But he knew us our entire lives. Watched over us, Emmett added. Protected us from shadows. And now we carry his flame, Briggs finished. Above them, sunlight filtered through oak leaves, casting dappled patterns across Jazz's resting place. Patterns that looked, just for a moment, like musical notations, like coordinates pointing toward home. The brothers rose together, walking back toward the black Mustang that had once belonged to a man they barely knew yet understood completely. Behind them, the small stones seemed to whisper the truth they now carried in their hearts. That justice and redemption sometimes wore the same face. That family transcended blood and time and law. That some flames purified even as they destroyed. That Jasper Jazz Beaumont, their father's firstborn son, had lived and died by a code as complex as the music he loved, and that his melody would continue through them, note by haunting note, into a future he had sacrificed everything to secure. And this is the end of the story.
Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this story. If you enjoyed this story, I promise you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more thrilling as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.